you're working with, hundreds of organizations, helping them do more with less. What are some of the strategies that you're employing to help them?
So a couple of the things that have come up that I think are just kind of real world, straightforward strategies are around consolidation. So gathering all the services that you say you need as a business within the area of IT, and sort of going down the line of and scrutinizing everything. So that's something that we're helping customers do across the board. Similar, it's basically like the accounts you keep at home.
Hmm.
I had somebody comment to me that they were killing, as soon as the pandemic hit and essential businesses were shut down, or non-essential businesses were shut down. You had folks even canceling their Spotify accounts or what have you, just kind of getting down to bare essentials. Well, it's a similar approach, but from a technology perspective, you have to have a lot of planning involved. So, you have to kind of know what your end state is going to look like. You can't just arbitrarily start cutting services because you deem it non-essential in the now, or cutting expenses. For instance, we have a customer right now that we're working on a data center consolidation project for them. And so basically it's effectively getting rid of a footprint, but they slowly discovered as we're doing the planning that some of the services that they have there are more necessary than they ever expected. So it's there's no fast way to rip the Band-Aid. You have to really take the time to plan out where you're going to have services live, and shrink the footprint as best you can.
Hmm. So that's that idea of consolidation at, like, let's say, an IT infrastructure level, correct?
At the IT infrastructure, and you can take it to the application as well. I mean, this is really it's really about finding efficiencies and lowering the overall spend through those efficiencies.
Gotcha. So might that be something like collapsing, two clouds into one? Might that be moving from a, on-prem or co-located or hosted infrastructure to, it includes all of those types of analyses?
Absolutely. One thing that I found was also really integral in trying to bring costs down, because again, this is, the cost savings are really, or the motivation that we found is very much saving someone's job. It's
Hmm.
saving the cash flow for payroll, et cetera. So strategically, you're saying, okay, if this means that I'll be able to not lose productivity, then let's look at every layer, inclusive of the application layer. And so one other strategy that was part of it was vendor consolidation.
Hmm.
So typically, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, but when the services are disparate enough, I found that it's pretty safe to do. Like, for instance, it's a shameless plug, but um, Techscape happens to be a strong Microsoft partner, right?
Hmm.
And we have a hosted voice platform as well. Now, those are two, hosting, let's say, managing your mailboxes through Office 365 or an Azure instance, some virtual appliances, and having your voice. You wouldn't even think of maximizing savings by consolidating that into one vendor, but they're far enough apart that, you know what, Microsoft isn't going anywhere, and it's
Hmm.
hosted outside of the vendor, but the vendor can leverage the relationship and bring those two together, for argument's sake, to drive more savings to the bottom line.
Right. So
That
just for
makes
the
sense?
record, yeah, it makes total sense. And just for the record, we did consolidate completely, and way before this whole Corona thing, but we consolidated on Microsoft's platform, including voice, years ago. And I got to tell you, it was one of the best decisions we ever made. I mean, there is a value to consolidation. So we see it as well on our side of the fence, right? You live on the managed services provider. We live
Hmm.
on that advisory and assessment side.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think there's a value on either side of our fence to, there's a concept of let's deploy best in class, and then there's another concept of single throat to choke. And the idea
Yes.
that, like we originally started our life with, using Skype and using a third-party voice provider. We had challenges with, sometimes the video conference wouldn't link up with the audio dial-in, the phone, and we'd call up the provider, and I won't name them by name, and they would say that's not our fault, it's Microsoft's. And then we call it Microsoft and say, hey, it's those damn guys, they don't know what they're doing. So I do think that there's some value there as well. And then the secondary thing I think is that there's hard and soft cost to managing vendors. So less vendors equals less level of effort, less cost if you're doing vendor risk management. And then I think you also have the potential, if you do it well, of you getting that synergistic effect of like 1 + 1 = 3. I don't know if you're familiar with like systems thinking, where we can break a system down into discrete elements. And if you look at systems thinking, and I've got, TechScape doing something, and I got Pivot Point doing, I got someone else doing something. I got, the challenge is you do have best of breed, and you've got this idea of this focus, but you could lose an end-to-end holistic view of what's going on. Like a good example is years ago, we were involved in a project where we were doing like a smart grid infrastructure assessment, and they chose to actually segment out who did which piece. So we did the smart thermostat, another vendor did the smart meter on the outside of the house. Well, we were able to totally compromise the smart meter. And we didn't, the smart thermostat. We didn't do the smart meter. They looked at the smart meter and said, the smart meter is great, does everything you're supposed to do. It actually didn't, but they didn't realize the type of an attack we could do inside on the thermostat, and that we were going to pass these malicious commands upstream through the meter and hit the DMS, which could cause problems, cause an outage of a electrical utility. So I do think there's this value, like you're talking about, of this consolidation. I think it goes beyond just a cost value. I think it becomes a management of that, and even potentially a value to the business.